In this chapter, we're going to discuss inventories and how we can manage them. Inventory is an asset that is held for future use or sale. Holding on to inventory comes with a cost. We have the cost of ordering, the cost of storing, and the cost of financing our inventories. These costs eventually will work their way through to the cost of goods sold. Operations managers and financial accountants are concerned about minimizing these costs while maintaining adequate levels of inventory. The marketing team wants a lot of inventory because, as they tell you, they can sell everything, right? Well, that might be true, but how long will it take them to sell it? How profitable or what kind of loss will be incurred when they do eventually sell it? Having too much inventory can be problematic. It can become obsolete. You have to store it, you have to move it. Having too little inventory can result in lost sales and poor public relations. The role of the operations manager is to try to balance the costs of holding inventories with the demand for those inventories, and that leads us to inventory management. In a nutshell, inventory management is a planning, coordinating, and controlling of the acquisition, where do we order, how do we order, the storage, the handling, the movement, and how we distribute our inventories, what parts, what subassemblies do we need to accompany our inventories, supplies and tools that are needed in warranties and guarantee work, what kind of equipment do we need to move around our inventory. Are there any other needs that the customer might have that are related to our inventory management? So just with this, you can see that the management of inventory is a many-faceted operation. We have a lot of things that we need to consider. There are three main types of inventory. You have your raw materials. These are the parts or raw goods that go into the making of the inventory item. Sometimes they're referred to as the inputs. We take these inputs, these raw materials, and we start the conversion process into making it into our final product. At the end of our accounting period, or at any time during our accounting period, we'll have goods that are partially completed. These are called work in process, sometimes work in goods, inventory. When we complete the inventory process, the manufacturing process, the goods are then completed. They're ready to distribute and sell. These are called finished goods inventory. And those are the three main facets of a manufacturing concern for inventory items. Now, if you're a retail outlet, you probably just have merchandise inventory, the goods that you're selling to the public. Both will have some sort of safety stock inventory. So this is the amount that's in excess of what we have predicted our needs to be, the safety measure to avoid running out. This is an example, an exhibit of the role of the inventory in the value chain. The first thing that we do is we identify our suppliers. Where do we get our raw materials from? Who do we source these through? These inputs can be people, they can be information, they can be physical goods. We take these inputs that we get from our suppliers and we bring them into our manufacturing cycle. We start the creation process. In this process, we'll need some additional things. We'll need some capital resources. We'll probably need some equipment. We'll need a building. We'll need labor to convert the input into a finished good. We'll need the land where the building is sitting on. We'll need our information resources. How do we receive orders? How do we let our customers know that how the orders are progressing? How do we track things? From this process, we will finish up and then we'll have our finished goods, those goods that are ready to sell. So now that we have the goods ready to sell, how do we distribute them? How do we sell them? What transportation needs do we have, etc.? And then we've got our post-sale services. Once the customer has received the goods, do we do some kind of follow-up, a confirmation of sale, a warranty work, guarantees? Do we send them documents, brochures? What do we do in our follow-up? Just a few of the decisions that we have to make in inventory management. This is not all-inclusive by any means. What is the right time to order items from a supplier? What inventory level should we place that order at so that we have enough time to receive the orders and not run out? So this is referred to as lead time. How much lead time do we need? The time from when we place the order until the order is received. Is there a minimum quantity that we should order? First, maybe our supplier requires a minimum, or when we balance the costs of ordering our inventory, is there a minimum quantity that we should order? What level of safety stock do we want for our organization? What is the best? What is the risk of running out of inventory? Next, we're going to look at some categories of inventory costs. So first, we've got our ordering costs, or the costs that are incurred to change over the equipment to get set up in a run in a factory. So these are the costs that we incur to place a purchase order with a supplier, or that changeover cost to set up goods for producing an item. Next, we have our holding costs. What does it cost us to carry the inventory? We got our storage facility, our heat, our lights. We got the cost of moving the items. We might have shrink. Items might get damaged every time we move them. We have the cost of capital. What else could the monies be tied up in instead of inventory or storage facilities? We've got the warehouse manager, the inventory stockers. We've got the equipment that we need to move the inventory between the warehouse, the operations, the floor space, whatever it is. Shortage costs or stockout costs. Well, shortage costs, stockout costs, that's going to be, depending on the type of the good, the consumer might order a good if it's stocked out. This is common with big ticket items like cars and furniture. Common in essential goods such as milk and coffee. If our brand isn't in the store, the customer will most likely buy a competing brand. Something like breakfast cereal that maybe we did an advertising promotion on, but it's not stocked on the store shelf. The consumer may just forego the sale, ask for a rain check, or take a substitute item that the retailer is offering. The unit cost is the price that we pay for the purchased goods or the internal cost of producing them. Let's take a look at some inventory characteristics. In the next few screens, this is what we're going to look at. The number of items, the nature of the demand, the number and duration of time periods, our lead time, and stockouts. We're going to talk about those all a little bit more. The number of items is, each item is identified by a unique identifier called a SKU. And this is a stock keeping unit. It's a single item or asset stored at a particular location. So every item in our facility has a particular SKU, and we can barcode it, we can put in a chip, whatever we want to do to track that. It's usually also how we order our goods. Now let's talk a little bit about demand. Demand can be measured either as stochastic demand, which brings in a probability distribution to characterize demand and will recognize random variability, or it can be deterministic, which is a more simple way to measure demand and it ignores the probability distribution. Independent demand usually is the demand for an end product, so I think your textbook cites an example of a chandelier. The dependent demand would be the light sockets. If that chandelier has 6 different light sockets, that is the dependent demand. It is dependent on the demand of the chandelier. Static demand means that demand is stable in nature, and dynamic demand means that it varies over time. Next, we're going to look at the number and duration of time periods. So firms are concerned with planning inventory requirements over extended periods of time. Depending on what, again, you are dealing with, this might be a single period or multiple time period. So if you're dealing in something that is rather seasonal, like a Christmas tree, Christmas candies, those kinds of things that you can't hold over till the next season, that will be a single period approach. Other items where we don't have those limitations, we'll probably take a look at multiple time periods in our planning. Lead time is, again, the time that we need between the placement of the order and when we received it. So it's affected by our transportation, our order frequency and size, and the supplier's production schedule. Stockouts. That's our inability to satisfy demand for an item. A back order occurs when a customer is willing to wait for the item, or we have a lost sale where the customer is unwilling to wait and purchases the item elsewhere. Next, we're going to talk a little bit about ABC inventory analysis. And the reason that we're going to look at this is when we're talking about inventory management, we have a lot of items that we need to look at. Is there a method that we can use to help us decide what should get more of our attention and what should maybe doesn't need as much attention? And this is one way that maybe we can do that. So we're going to categorize our SKUs into groups according to their total annual dollar usage. So A items are going to be the big dollar items. So they're the items that are maybe a small percentage of our total items that we use in a year, yet they're a big percentage of our total dollar value. So they have a large investment. So we certainly want to make sure that a lot of our time and attention goes into those type A items. Type C items are those that we maybe use a lot more of, but they really account for far less of a total dollar value. Now, if it's a little bolt that is an integral part of our manufacturing process, we do want to make sure that we don't run out of that, because that 5-cent little bolt could stop the whole operation. But we maybe don't have to manage that cost as much. Maybe we can have more of those smaller dollar value items in stock. Maybe we order larger amounts of those, and our reorders are less frequent. The item B items will be those between A and C, and you saw the extremes between A and C, the high dollar value to the low dollar value. They'll need a focus that's somewhere in between those two extremes. Let's now take a look at an example of the ABC valuation method. And once you look through this, you'll be ready to work on your first problem. So give me a second here and I will get loaded up with our ABC problem. So here I've just given you, or we're just starting with, we've got 20 items here, and we've got our projected annual use, and we've got our unit cost. So the first thing that I'm going to do, and you don't have to do this, but it might make it a little easier, I'm going to go ahead and insert a table. So if you can't remember how to do that, we just come in, we do insert a table. It automatically found my information, and I leave the box checked that said my table has headers, because it does, and we say OK. And now you can see that this has brought this into a table format for me. And we'll tidy this up just a little bit. The other thing, we probably should just make our numbers look a little bit nicer. So here I'm just going to format, and I'll do a number. No decimal places, no currency, because this is our usage, this is our quantity. Next we have our unit cost, so we can go ahead and just make this one a dollar value, and we'll just decrease the decimals. Okay, so the next thing that I want to know is, what is my total cost, projected cost? So I'll take my usage and multiply it by the projected, or the unit cost, right? So we'll just call this dollar annual dollar usage. Now if you just start typing this in right next to the table, it will add the column for you. And if we just say equal B3 times our unit cost, and it will fill that table for us. And now here again, just so that we remember that this is a dollar item, let's go ahead and just format that as a currency with 0. Oh, I guess we'll make it accounting maybe. There we go. Alright, now let's come in and bring in some totals. I'm going to bring in a total of the projected usage of the items. Oh, it must have came down one too many. So now you can see that I now have a little drop down box, and I can just do a sum, and there it fixed my problem. And now I'm going to do the same thing over at the annual. I can just do that sum, and my column is not quite big enough. Okay, so you can see that I have a total annual usage of 76,879 items, a total annual dollar amount of $2,550,450. Now the next thing that I want to do is I want to sort these, and this is why I had you put it in a table. It makes the sort really easy. You can just come up here in your annual dollar, and you can just say sort largest to smallest, and it resorted everything for us. Now the next thing that I'm going to do is I want to analyze what percentage this dollar amount is of the total, and I want to do it cumulatively. So now I've got them ordered in the highest cost item to the lowest annual dollar amount. I'm going to just sneak in a little small column here so that it's not with my table, and I'm going to come in and do an annual cumulative dollar usage. Let's call this cumulative percentage of dollar usage. There we go. And make that look a little bit nicer. We'll wrap that text. Okay, so what I want to do here is I'm going to take my annual dollar amount, and I'm going to divide it by the total. Now notice, because I have mine called a table, I don't have to worry about using my absolute cell references or anything, because it will automatically do it. In the next line, I want to do a sum of the total. Here I am going to come in, and I always want to make it include the first number. So I want it to sum to the point that we are, and then I want it to divide by my total. And we should now be able to copy that all the way down. And if we get a 1 down here, that means that we did it right. We're going to do the same thing with a cumulative percentage of item usage. And let's go ahead and wrap that text also. Alright, so the items, now we're going to do the 10,000 divided by the 76,879, and we'll want the cumulative again. So we'll do the first number, and we'll make sure that that stays with us, and to the next number, and we're going to divide that by our total. And now hopefully we did that one right. We'll copy that down, and it should cumulatively be 100% by the time we're done. So let's go ahead and convert these to a percentage. We'll make that be a percentage, and let's bring it in a couple of decimals. Now we're going to come in and do our ABC analysis. Remember that the type A was maybe only 10 to 30% in total of our items, but 60 to 80% of our cost. So if we kind of look at where that might fall, here we've got 74% of our cost, dollar usage, and 29% of our cumulative item usage. So we could cut this off either, I would say either right here or right here, and we'll go ahead and we'll call those A inventory items. Now the next one that we'll take a look at, we kind of leave B as a default. It just winds up being everything else. We've got kind of a large number of low value items in this one. So here we're looking for, it maybe has 5 to 15% or maybe even less of the total value, but 50 to 60% of the items. So here we're sitting at 30% roughly. So when we get here, we've got about 76%. So that's a remaining 24% of our items fall in this category, but they only cover 6% of our costs, actually less than that, like about 5.3%. So let's go ahead and make this our break for the C items. Now when you're doing this, this is obviously, you can see this is a little bit subjective. You might have chosen yours a little bit differently than I did, and just as long as you explain why you're making the choice, where your cutoffs kind of were and how they make sense to you, then we'll be good. Everything that falls in between will be a B item. And then you can just kind of pretty this up if you want, so we can do a painter and just come along and paint that all. And maybe we even want to center these. Now if you want to add a chart or a graph or whatever you might want to do, you could, do sum up the A's, the B's, and the C's, and then do a chart. I did that in this one. I just used a sum if and summed up all of my A, B's, and C's, and I did an annual cost and an annual use. And you can kind of see then visually how it works out. This is the annual cost of the item A's and the annual use. So heavy cost, smaller use. B, still pretty good cost values in those, but the use is increasing. And by the time we get to items C's, we have less cost and more annual use. And that completes our lesson 1. When you look on Blackboard, the ABC assignment is going to be a worksheet that is provided with the homework assignments, so you can go ahead and do that worksheet and then add your other problems to that as you proceed through the problems. It is not a problem that is in the textbook. Have a good day, and we'll see you around for lesson 2.